The silk of my worst dress clung to my skin like a punishment I'd chosen for myself. It wasn't truly silk, just cheap polyester pretending to be something better, the fabric thin enough that I could feel every breath of air conditioning against my thighs. The hemline fell unevenly, shorter on one side where I'd tried to fix a tear with thread that didn't quite match. My fingers worried the frayed edge as I stood in the hallway outside my father's study, listening to the low murmur of male voices behind the heavy oak door. I'd dressed deliberately badly, worn my hair in a messy bun that made me look younger, more careless. Applied no makeup except for a smudge of old lipstick I'd wiped half away. My father had guests, important guests, he'd said with that edge in his voice that meant business, meant danger, meant I should make myself invisible. So I'd done the opposite of invisible. I'd made myself forgettable. The marble floor was cold beneath my bare feet. I'd kicked off my shoes somewhere between the kitchen and here, leaving them like breadcrumbs I had no intention of following back. The house smelled of cigar smoke and expensive cologne, scents that didn't belong to my father but to whoever sat behind that door. Scents that made my stomach twist with something I couldn't name. I shouldn't be here. I should be upstairs in my room, door locked, pretending I didn't exist. That's what my father wanted. That's what he always wanted when his business associates came around. But curiosity had always been my fatal flaw, the thing that got me into trouble more times than I could count. And tonight, something felt different. The air itself seemed charged, electric, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. My father's voice rose slightly, audible through the door. "She's nobody. Just my daughter. You don't need to concern yourself. I concern myself with everything." The other voice cut through like a blade through silk. Low, controlled, accent I couldn't quite place. Italian maybe, or something similar, smoothed by years of speaking English. "Everything in this house became my concern the moment your son stole from me." My breath caught. My brother. Of course this was about my brother. Marco didn't know who he was dealing with, my father said, and I could hear the desperation creeping into his tone. "He's young, stupid. He'll pay back every cent. Your son stole $3 million from one of my shipments and disappeared like smoke." That voice again. So quiet it was almost a whisper. But somehow it filled every corner of the room, leaked through the door and wrapped around my throat. Money I can replace. The disrespect? That requires compensation. I pressed my palm against the door, feeling the grain of the wood beneath my fingertips. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought it might bruise. Marco had always been reckless, always pushing boundaries, but stealing from the Mafia, that was beyond reckless. That was suicidal. "Please." My father's voice cracked. I'd never heard him sound like that, never heard him beg. "I'll give you anything. The house, my businesses, everything I have. I don't want your house." A pause. The sound of ice clinking in a glass. "I want your son. And until I have him, I'll take something else as collateral." The door swung open so suddenly I stumbled forward, barely catching myself on the doorframe. My father's face went white, but I wasn't looking at him. I couldn't look at him, because every fiber of my being, every nerve ending in my body, had oriented itself toward the man sitting in the leather chair by the window. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe 30. Certainly not older than 35. Dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble. Strong jaw, sharp cheekbones, lips that looked cruel even in repose. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than my father's car, tailored so perfectly it looked like a second skin. His eyes, when they met mine, were so dark they seemed black in the dim light of the study. But it wasn't his beauty that stopped my breath. It was the recognition. I knew this man. I knew the exact angle of his jaw, the way his long fingers wrapped around the crystal tumbler in his hand. I knew him because I'd spent 6 months falling in love with a ghost, with a stranger in a coffee shop who'd never told me his real name, Mia. He said my name like he was tasting it, testing the weight of it on his tongue. He didn't smile, didn't move, just watched me with those obsidian eyes while the world tilted sideways beneath my feet. "You," I whispered. My voice came out broken, raw. "You're Dante Caruso." He set down his glass with precise, controlled movements. Behind him, 2 men in dark suits materialized from the shadows. One by the window, one near the bookshelf. I hadn't even noticed them before, though you knew me as Daniel. The man who'd bought me coffee every Tuesday and Thursday for 6 months. Who'd listened to me talk about my dreams of leaving this city, of studying art in Florence. Who'd touched my hand across the table and made me believe in possibility, in future, in something beyond the suffocating weight of my father's world. Daniel, who'd kissed me once in the rain outside that coffee shop and then disappeared without explanation, leaving me to wonder what I'd done wrong. No. The words scraped out of my throat. You're not... This isn't... Your father didn't tell you? Dante's gaze shifted to my father, something dangerous flickering in those dark eyes. Didn't warn you that your brother's stupidity would have consequences? Leave her out of this. My father moved between us, his back to me, shoulders rigid. She has nothing to do with Marco's choices. She has everything to do with them. Dante stood in one fluid movement, and I realized how tall he was, how he seemed to fill the room with presence alone. You offered me everything you have. Well, Sal, I'm taking you up on that offer. The air left my lungs. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think past the roaring in my ears. What? My father's voice came out strangled. Dante walked toward us, each step measured, deliberate. The men behind him moved too, silent as shadows. He stopped just inches from my father, so close I could smell his cologne. Cedar and something darker, something that made my mouth go dry. Your daughter. His eyes found mine over my father's shoulder. She'll come with me. Live under my protection until your son returns what he stole. Consider her collateral. Insurance that you'll cooperate. Absolutely not. My father grabbed my arm, pulled me behind him. She's my daughter. She's not part of this world. She became part of this world the moment she was born into your family. Dante's voice never rose, never changed inflection, but somehow it commanded absolute attention. And she became part of my world 6 months ago when I decided I wanted her. My blood turned to ice. What? His gaze locked with mine, and in those black depths I saw something that made my knees weak. Hunger. Possession. A darkness that should have terrified me but instead sent heat pooling low in my belly. Did you think our meetings were coincidence? He tilted his head slightly. That I just happened to be at that coffee shop every Tuesday and Thursday? That I just happened to sit at your table, to talk to you about art and dreams and all the pretty lies you tell yourself about who you are? You're insane. The words came out as a whisper. You planned this? All of it? I plan everything, Kara. He moved around my father like he was furniture. Nothing but an obstacle easily bypassed. I saw you at a gallery 6 months ago. You were wearing a blue dress, looking at a painting of Venice like it held all the answers to questions you were afraid to ask, and I decided then that I would have you. My father lunged. It was clumsy, desperate. The move of a man who'd lost everything and had nothing left to lose. Dante's bodyguard caught him mid-stride, slammed him back against the desk with enough force to rattle the picture frames. A gun appeared, pressed against my father's temple. Don't. Dante didn't even look at them. His eyes stayed on me, dark and consuming. I'd prefer not to kill him in front of you, but I will if necessary. Stop. I heard my voice from very far away. Please, just stop, then come here. It wasn't a request. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. My father made a sound like a wounded animal. The gun pressed harder against his skull. My feet moved. One step, then another. The cheap dress whispered against my thighs as I crossed the Persian rug, past the leather furniture, walked into the orbit of a man who'd orchestrated 6 months of my life like I was a puppet, and he held all the strings. I stopped when I was close enough to see the flecks of gold in his irises, close enough to count his heartbeats and the pulse at his throat. He smelled exactly like I remembered, cedar and darkness, and something indefinable that made me want to lean closer, even as every instinct screamed at me to run. Good girl. His hand came up, fingers ghosting along my jaw, with a gentleness that contradicted everything else about this moment. You always were so quick to learn. I hate you. The words tasted like ash, I know. His thumb traced my lower lip, the touch so light it might have been imagination. You'll hate me more before this is over. But you'll also understand why I did this, why I couldn't let you go. Behind him, his bodyguard released my father, who collapsed against the desk, gasping. Dante's eyes never left my face. "Pack a bag," he said softly. "You have 10 minutes. Bring whatever you can't live without. Everything else I'll provide. And if I refuse?" His smile was a terrible thing, beautiful and cruel. "Then your father dies. Your brother dies when we find him. And you come with me anyway, but with blood on your hands. Your choice, Mia. It's always been your choice. It wasn't a choice. We both knew it. But he gave me the illusion of one anyway. This man who'd wooed me with coffee and conversation, who'd made me believe in possibilities that didn't exist. I turned away from him, from those consuming dark eyes, and walked out of the study on legs that felt like water. Behind me, I heard my father's broken sob, heard Dante's quiet command to his men, heard the sound of my world shattering like crystal on marble. In my room, I stared at the open suitcase on my bed. My hands shook as I reached for clothes, for shoes, for the small things that had made up my life. A photograph of my mother, dead 10 years now, a sketchbook filled with drawings of places I'd never see, the cheap necklace Dante, had given me the last time I saw him, before he vanished. I held the necklace up to the light, a small silver bird, wings spread in flight. "Freedom," he'd said when he gave it to me. "Something everyone deserves." I almost laughed, almost cried. Did neither because I was afraid if I started I'd never stop. The 10 minutes passed like seconds, like hours. When I emerged from my room, pulling the suitcase behind me, Dante waited at the bottom of the stairs. My father was nowhere to be seen, just Dante and his shadows, and the promise of everything I'd feared since the moment I understood what my family really was. "Ready?" he asked, as if I had any choice in the matter. I descended the stairs slowly, each step taking me further from the girl I'd been and closer to whatever I was becoming. The worst dress I owned suddenly felt prophetic, dressed for an ending I hadn't seen coming. At the bottom of the stairs, Dante took my suitcase from my hand. His fingers brushed mine, deliberate and lingering. "I meant what I said in the coffee shop," he murmured, low enough that only I could hear, "about wanting to show you Venice, about all of it. You lied about everything else." My voice came out steady, stronger than I felt. "No." His hand caught my chin, forced me to look at him. "I lied about my name. Everything else was truth, the most dangerous kind of truth." Outside, an SUV waited, black and gleaming in the streetlight. The door stood open like a mouth ready to swallow me whole. I looked back once at my father's house, at the windows dark except for the light in his study where his world had ended tonight. Then I stepped into the vehicle, into leather seats and tinted windows, and a future I couldn't imagine. Dante slid in beside me, close enough that his thigh pressed against mine. The door closed with a final, terrible click. "Where are we going?" I asked as the SUV pulled away from the curb. His hand found mine in the darkness between us, fingers lacing through mine with a possessiveness that should have terrified me. "Home," he said simply, "my home. Where you'll stay until your brother surfaces. Where I can keep you safe." Safe from what? He turned to look at me, and in the passing streetlights his face was all angles and shadows. "From everyone who'll want to use you against me now. From your brother's enemies, from my enemies, from everyone except me." The SUV accelerated, carrying us through darkened streets toward a destination I didn't know, couldn't imagine. Dante's hand stayed locked with mine, warm and unyielding. A chain disguised as comfort, a cage dressed up as protection. And despite everything, despite the lies, the manipulation, the calculated seduction, my traitorous heart beat faster at his touch, remembering coffee and rain and kisses that had tasted like possibility. The penthouse occupied the entire top floor of a building I'd passed 1,000 times without ever imagining what existed beyond its marble facade, floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around 3 sides, offering a view of the city that made me feel like I was floating above the world, rather than trapped within it. The furniture was minimalist, black leather, chrome, glass surfaces that reflected the ambient lighting in shades of amber and gold. Everything was sharp angles and clean lines, beautiful in the way a knife is beautiful. Dante's hand remained at the small of my back as he guided me inside, a touch that felt both protective and possessive. The 2 bodyguards who'd ridden in the front of the SUV disappeared somewhere behind us, their footsteps silent on the hardwood floors. Your room is through there. He gestured toward a hallway. Second door on the left. Mine is at the end of the hall. You'll have privacy, but the windows don't open and the balcony door is locked. For your safety. You mean to keep me from running? The words came out flat, emotionless. I mean to keep you alive. He moved away from me, shrugging out of his suit jacket with movements that were unconsciously elegant. Marco stole from the Calabrian family. They've put a price on his head and, by extension, on anyone connected to him. Your father's house was being watched. You wouldn't have lasted the night. I wanted to call him a liar, wanted to believe this was just another manipulation, another string he was pulling, but the exhaustion in his voice sounded genuine, and the way he rolled his shoulders like the weight of the world sat on them seemed too human for the monster I needed him to be. Why do you care? I set my suitcase down, wrapped my arms around myself. The air conditioning made goosebumps rise on my exposed skin. If they kill me, your problem is solved. No collateral needed. He turned to look at me, and something dangerous flickered across his face. You really think I orchestrated 6 months of your life, learned everything about you, made you laugh in that coffee shop, just to let someone put a bullet in your head? I don't know what to think anymore. My voice cracked despite my best efforts. I don't know who you are, who I am, what any of this means. Dante closed the distance between us in 3 long strides. His hands came up to frame my face, tilting my chin so I had no choice but to meet his eyes. They weren't black anymore, this close. I could see they were actually deep brown, the color of espresso. You're Mia Santoro, he said quietly. 23 years old, art history major who dropped out to take care of your father after your mother died. You drink your coffee black with 2 sugars. You sketch on napkins when you think no one is watching. You have a scar on your left knee from falling off your bike when you were 8. Your favorite painting is Botticelli's Birth of Venus, and you cry every time you talk about never getting to see it in person. My breath hitched. He'd remembered. Every small detail I'd shared over coffee, every piece of myself I'd given to Daniel the stranger, he'd kept like treasures. That's who you are, he continued, his thumbs stroking along my cheekbones. And I'm Dante Caruso, head of the Caruso family, 3rd-generation Italian-American who built an empire on my father's grave. I'm 32 years old. I take my espresso straight. I collect Renaissance art. And 6 months ago, I saw a woman in a gallery who looked at paintings like they were portals to another world, and I decided I would burn down everything I'd built just to see her look at me that way. That's insane. But my voice came out whispered, breathless. Yes. His forehead touched mine. It is. But I've never claimed to be sane where you're concerned. The moment stretched between us, taut as a wire. His breath ghosted across my lips. I could feel his heartbeat through the thin fabric of his shirt, steady and strong. All I had to do was lean forward. Just an inch, maybe less, and our mouths would meet. Instead, I pulled back. I need to shower, to think, to process whatever nightmare I've walked into. Something like disappointment crossed his face, but he nodded and stepped away. There are clothes in the closet. I had them brought in this week. Your sizes, your preferred colors. Everything you might need. This week. I laughed, the sound brittle. You were that confident I'd end up here? I was that determined. He retrieved his jacket from where he'd draped it over a chair. I would have found another way if your brother hadn't forced my hand. But Marco's theft gave me the excuse I needed, the justification my family would accept. An excuse to kidnap me, an excuse to protect you while simultaneously solving a problem. He moved toward the hallway. Sleep, Mia. Tomorrow we'll discuss the rules, the boundaries, how this arrangement will work. Tonight, just rest. Dante. His name felt strange on my tongue. Too intimate, too real. He paused, looked back. In the coffee shop, when you kissed me that last time, was any of it real? The expression that crossed his face was raw, unguarded. That was the most real thing I've ever done, which is why I had to disappear, because I was falling too fast, feeling too much, and I couldn't let emotion compromise the plan I'd already set in motion. He left before I could respond, his footsteps fading down the hallway. I stood alone in the enormous living room, surrounded by luxury that felt like mockery, and tried to remember how to breathe. The bedroom he'd indicated was larger than my entire apartment had been. A king-sized bed dominated the space, dressed in white linens that looked impossibly soft. The ensuite bathroom was all marble and chrome, the shower big enough for 3 people, and the closet. I opened it with trembling hands. Dresses hung in neat rows, organized by color. Casual clothes, formal wear, workout attire. Shoes lined the bottom shelf, everything from sneakers to heels. Drawers held underwear, sleepwear, accessories, all of it in my size, all of it in styles I would have chosen for myself. He'd studied me, learned me, prepared for this moment with the same precision he probably applied to every aspect of his life. I grabbed the simplest thing I could find, a soft cotton nightgown, and retreated to the bathroom. The shower was scalding hot, the water pressure almost painful against my skin. I stood under the spray until my fingers pruned, until the cheap dress I'd worn lay in a sodden heap on the tile floor, until I couldn't tell if the wetness on my face was water or tears. When I finally emerged, wrapped in a towel that was probably worth more than a month's rent, I found a tray on the nightstand. Soup, something that smelled like vegetables and herbs, and bread still warm from the oven, a glass of red wine, a note in elegant handwriting. You didn't eat dinner. D. I shouldn't have touched it. Should have thrown it against the wall, refused this small kindness, like I should refuse everything about this situation. Instead, I sat on the edge of the bed and ate every drop, suddenly ravenous in a way I hadn't been in months. The soup tasted homemade, the bread melted on my tongue, the wine warmed me from the inside out, loosening the knots in my shoulders. I hated that it was good. Hated that he knew I'd be hungry, that he'd anticipated this need, like he'd anticipated everything else. I'd just set the empty tray aside when my phone buzzed. My father. "Mia, baby, are you okay? Did he hurt you?" "I'm fine." I kept my voice low, conscious that Dante's men were somewhere in this penthouse, that walls might have ears. He has me in a penthouse downtown. He says it's for my protection. Protection. My father's laugh was bitter. He wants you, Mia. Has wanted you since before any of this with Marco happened. I should have seen it coming, should have protected you better. What do you mean, since before? My hand tightened on the phone. How long have you known about him? Silence stretched across the line. Then, 6 months. Maybe 7. One of his men approached me, asked questions about you, your routine, your habits, where you like to spend time. I thought he was vetting you for Marco, making sure your brother wasn't getting involved with the wrong people. By the time I understood what was really happening, you were already meeting him for coffee. The world tilted again. You knew? You knew Daniel was really Dante Caruso and you said nothing? What could I say? That a Mafia boss was courting my daughter? That would have made you run straight to him just to spite me. His voice broke. I thought if I stayed quiet, if I let it run its course, he'd lose interest. Men like him always do. But then Marco stole from him. I finished, my voice hollow. And suddenly, Dante had the perfect excuse to take what he wanted. I'm working on getting you out. I've made calls, reached out to old contacts. Just hold on, baby. Don't give him anything. Promise me. I looked around the bedroom, at the clothes he'd chosen, the food he'd sent, the care wrapped in imprisonment. I have to go. Mia. I hung up, turned off the phone, set it on the nightstand and stared at the dark screen until my vision blurred. Sleep should have been impossible, but exhaustion pulled me under like a riptide. I dreamed of coffee shops and rain, of kisses that tasted like promise, of hands that touched with reverence before closing into fists. Morning arrived with sunlight streaming through windows I hadn't bothered to cover. I woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where I was until memory crashed back like a wave. Dante's penthouse, Dante's prisoner, Dante's plan that had been in motion long before I'd ever known his name. Someone had laid out clothes while I slept. Dark jeans, a soft sweater, undergarments still in their packaging. The efficiency of it made my skin crawl. I dressed quickly, hyper-aware that I was putting on clothes he'd selected, covering my body in armor he'd provided. The smell of coffee drew me down the hallway. I found Dante in the kitchen, leaning against a marble countertop with an espresso cup in hand. He'd changed into dark slacks and a white button-down with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle and marked with a tattoo I couldn't quite make out. His hair was still damp from a shower. He looked up when I entered, and something in his expression softened. "Coffee?" He gestured to a machine that probably cost more than a car. "I remember how you take it. I can make my own coffee." But I moved toward the machine anyway, because caffeine felt necessary for whatever this day would bring. "There are rules we need to discuss." He set down his cup. "Boundaries that will keep you safe and make this arrangement bearable for both of us." Arrangement? I laughed without humor. Is that what we're calling kidnapping now? "I prefer protective custody." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "But call it whatever helps you sleep at night." I didn't sleep. The lie came easily. I spent all night planning how to escape. "Did you come up with anything feasible?" He sounded genuinely curious. "No." I added sugar to my coffee, watched it dissolve. "The windows don't open. The door is guarded. And even if I made it out of the building, where would I go? Back to my father's house where the Calabrians are watching? To friends who'd be endangered by association? I'm trapped, and you know it." "You're protected," he corrected. "There's a difference." "Tell me the rules." I turned to face him, coffee cup clutched between my hands like a lifeline. "Tell me how this prison operates." His jaw tightened. "You have free run of the penthouse. My men won't enter your room unless there's an emergency. You can use the gym, the library, the media room. Anything you need, books, art supplies, whatever, will be provided. A doctor will come weekly to ensure you're healthy. And if I want to leave, you can, with me or with 2 of my guards, never alone." He moved closer, his presence filling the space between us. "I'm not keeping you locked in a cage, Mia. But I won't let you die because of your brother's mistakes either." How noble. The words tasted like acid. "What about my father? My life? My job? Your father is being watched. We'll ensure his safety as long as he cooperates. As for your job, you were a barista at a coffee shop making minimum wage. I've deposited 6-month salary in your account as compensation for the disruption. The casual dismissal of my life, the reduction of everything I was to a dollar amount, made rage bloom hot in my chest. You think you can just buy me, replace my existence with money and expensive clothes, and I think I can keep you alive." His voice hardened. "Which is more than your father managed to do. More than you were managing on your own. I was fine before you inserted yourself into my life. You were surviving." He set his cup down with enough force that the sound cracked through the kitchen. "Working a dead-end job, supporting a father who gambled away your college fund, dreaming about art galleries in cities you'd never see because you were too busy being everyone's savior. That's not fine, Kara. That's slow death." The truth of it stung worse than any slap. "So what? You're rescuing me? Is that the story you tell yourself? I'm claiming you." His hand shot out, caught my wrist, pulled me close enough that I could see the gold flecks in his irises again. I saw something I wanted, and I took it. That's who I am. What I am. And yes, I'll keep you safe in the process. But don't mistake protection for altruism. This is pure selfishness. My pulse hammered against his fingers. "What do you want from me?" "Everything." The word was barely a whisper. "Your time, your attention, your eventual trust. And when you're ready, when you stop hating me long enough to remember why you used to smile when I walked into that coffee shop. I want everything else too. I'll never stop hating you. We'll see." He released my wrist, stepped back. "A tutor will arrive this afternoon. You mentioned wanting to finish your degree. I've arranged for private instruction in art history. As many courses as you want." The gesture should have felt manipulative, like everything else. Instead, it felt like he'd reached into my chest and pulled out dreams I'd buried years ago. "Why?" "Because you deserve to learn, to grow. To become whoever you would have been if life hadn't beaten you down." He picked up his jacket from a nearby chair. "I have business today. I'll be gone until evening. Marco will stay with you, one of my men. He's been instructed not to engage unless you initiate conversation." Try not to do anything that would require him to restrain you. Where are you going? Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. To remind your brother that actions have consequences. Don't worry, I won't kill him. Yet, but he needs to understand what he's cost you with his greed. Wait. But he was already moving toward the door, already leaving me alone with my coffee and my confusion, and the terrible realization that part of me, some small, traitorous part, was relieved he wasn't going to hurt Marco. The door closed behind him with a soft click. I stood in the kitchen surrounded by marble and chrome and morning light, a prisoner in a gilded cage who couldn't quite remember why she wanted to escape. The tutor arrived at exactly 2 o'clock. A woman in her 50s with kind eyes and gray hair pulled into a neat chignon. She introduced herself as Dr. Elena Rossi, professor emerita from the university I'd once dreamed of attending. The irony wasn't lost on me. Dante had brought the mountain to me since I couldn't go to the mountain. We sat in what Dante called the library, a room lined floor to ceiling with books that actually looked read rather than decorative. Leather-bound volumes in Italian and English, art history texts that made my fingers itch to touch them, first editions that probably cost more than my father's house. Mr. Caruso tells me you have a particular interest in Renaissance art, Dr. Rossi said, arranging her materials on the mahogany table between us. Specifically the Italian masters. He tells everyone a lot of things. I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. She looked at me over her reading glasses, something like understanding in her expression. I've known Dante since he was a boy. His mother was a patron of the arts. She funded my research for years before she passed. He's not an easy man, but he's not without honor either. Honor. I laughed without humor. Is that what we're calling this? I'm calling it complicated. She opened a thick textbook, revealing glossy photographs of paintings I'd only ever seen on a computer screen. But we're not here to discuss his methods. We're here to discuss Caravaggio's use of chiaroscuro and why it revolutionized Baroque painting. Unless you'd prefer to waste both our time with self-pity. The sharp rebuke caught me off guard. Then, despite everything, I felt the corner of my mouth twitch. Caravaggio was a murderer who died running from his crimes. Seems appropriate for today's lesson. There. That's the fire I was told to expect. Dr. Rossi smiled. Now, let's begin with the calling of St. Matthew. Tell me what you see. For 3 hours, I lost myself in art and analysis, in discussions of light and shadow and the revolutionary techniques that had changed painting forever. Dr. Rossi was brilliant, challenging, never talking down to me despite the gaps in my formal education. She treated me like a scholar, not a prisoner, and I found myself responding with an enthusiasm I'd thought dead. When she finally packed up her materials, she paused at the door. Same time Thursday? I'll be here. Where else would I be? It's not like I have other plans. Dante mentioned you sketched. She pulled a wrapped package from her bag. These are professional grade. Pencils, charcoal, paper. Better than napkins. I took the package with trembling hands. Thank you. Thank him. He's the one who noticed what you needed. She left before I could respond, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. I unwrapped the package slowly, reverently. The supplies inside were top quality, the kind I'd coveted in art stores but could never justify buying. Each pencil felt perfectly weighted in my hand. The paper was thick, textured, begging to be marked. Marco, the bodyguard, not my brother, watched from his position near the window as I spread everything across the coffee table. He was young, maybe 25, with the kind of bland handsomeness that made him instantly forgettable, perfect for someone who needed to blend into crowds. You draw? He asked, breaking hours of silence. I looked up, surprised he'd spoken. Sometimes, when I can't sleep or think straight. Boss has some of your sketches framed in his office. He shifted his weight, uncomfortable. From the coffee shop, the ones you left behind on napkins. My stomach dropped. What? Yeah. The waitress would collect them after you left, give them to him. He has maybe 20 of them. Drawings of faces, buildings, that kind of thing. Marco shrugged. Seemed weird to me, but he said they helped him understand how you saw the world. I set down the pencil I'd been holding, suddenly nauseous. He kept them? He's had them this whole time? Kept them, framed them, looks at them when he thinks no one's watching. Marco's expression was carefully neutral. For what it's worth, I've worked for a lot of bosses. Never seen one look at anything the way he looks at those drawings, or the way he looks at you. He's obsessed. The word tasted like poison. Yeah. Marco didn't disagree. But there are worse things to be than the obsession of a man who'd burn the world down to keep you safe. That's not romantic. That's terrifying. Can't it be both? He moved toward the hallway. I'm going to check the perimeter. Stay inside. Don't do anything stupid. When he left, I picked up a pencil and started drawing without thinking. Lines became curves. Curves became a face. Dark eyes, strong jaw, cruel mouth that had kissed me like I was oxygen. Before I knew it, Dante stared up at me from the page, rendered in charcoal and shadow. I should have torn it up. Instead, I signed it with a savagery that ripped the paper, then started another. Dante returned as the sun set, painting the penthouse in shades of amber and blood. I heard his voice first, low and controlled, speaking Italian to someone on the phone. Then footsteps, the sound of his jacket being discarded, the clink of ice in a glass. I stayed in the library, surrounded by drawings I'd spent the afternoon creating. Faces, hands, architectural details from memory. And in the center, one sketch I couldn't bring myself to hide. Dante sleeping, imagined, vulnerable in a way I'd never seen him. You've been productive. His voice came from the doorway, making me jump. He'd loosened his tie, rolled up his sleeves. There was blood on his cuff, just a spot, barely visible, but unmistakably red. Whose blood is that? I stood, putting the table between us. He glanced down, noticed the stain, and frowned. Not your brother's, if that's what you're worried about. One of his associates thought he could negotiate. He was wrong. You killed him. I broke his arm and sent him back to the Calabrians with a message about respecting boundaries. Dante moved into the room, his gaze sweeping across the drawings scattered on every surface. Killing him would have started a war. I prefer more elegant solutions. He stopped when he reached the sketch of himself sleeping, picked it up with careful fingers, studied it in the fading light. Something shifted in his expression, something raw and unguarded that made my breath catch. Is this how you see me? He asked quietly. Peaceful. Safe? It's how I imagine you'd look if you ever let your guard down. The honesty surprised me, which I'm guessing is never. I let my guard down with you. He set the drawing aside, moved closer. In that coffee shop, every Tuesday and Thursday for 6 months. Those were the only hours in my week when I wasn't Dante Caruso, head of a crime family. I was just Daniel, a man having coffee with a woman who made him forget why he'd learned to be hard. You lied about your name. I told the truth about everything else. Another step closer. When I said you were beautiful, that was true. When I said I thought about you constantly, that was true. When I kissed you in the rain and said I'd never wanted anything more than to keep kissing you, that was the truest thing I've ever spoken. Then why did you disappear? The question ripped out of me. Why did you kiss me like that, and then vanish for 3 months without a word? He stopped inches away, close enough that I could smell cedar and something darker, gunpowder maybe, or the metallic tang of violence. Because I was falling in love with you, and love makes men weak. Makes them vulnerable, and I couldn't afford vulnerability when I was planning to tear apart your family to get to your brother. So you chose revenge over— I couldn't finish. Over us, I'd almost said, but there was no us. There never had been. I chose survival. His hand came up, fingers ghosting along my jaw. My family. My responsibilities. The weight of generations of Carusos who built their empire on blood and loyalty. I chose duty over desire. But I never stopped thinking about you. Never stopped planning how I'd make you mine once the chaos settled. And Marco just gave you the perfect excuse. Marco forced my hand sooner than I wanted. His thumb traced my lower lip, the touch electric. I'd planned to wait, to court you properly once your brother's debt was settled. But when the Calabrians put a price on Santoro heads, I had to move. Had to take you somewhere I could protect you. This isn't protection. It's possession. Yes. He didn't deny it. I possess what I value, and Mia, I value you more than anything else in my world. More than money, more than power, more than the empire my father died building. His other hand came up to frame my face, holding me still while those dark eyes bored into mine. I know you hate me. I know you think I'm a monster, but I'm the monster who'll keep you alive, who'll give you everything you ever dreamed of, who'll worship you like the Renaissance masterpieces you love so much. You can't buy me with tutors and art supplies and pretty words. I'm not trying to buy you. His forehead touched mine. I'm trying to show you that the life I'm offering isn't a cage. It's freedom, real freedom, to be whoever you want to be without worrying about money or safety or your father's failures. Freedom would be letting me leave. Freedom would be getting you killed. His voice hardened. The Calabrians have eyes everywhere. Your father's house is under surveillance. Your friends are being watched. The only place you're safe is here, with me, behind security that cost more than most people make in a lifetime. How convenient for you. Convenient would have been letting you die and using your corpse as a message to your brother. The brutality of the statement made me flinch. Convenient would have been never walking into that coffee shop, never learning that you take your coffee with 2 sugars, never kissing you in the rain. Instead, I complicated my entire life because I couldn't stop thinking about how you looked at paintings like they held the secrets of the universe. He pulled back, ran a hand through his hair. The first sign of frustration I'd seen from him. You want honesty? Here's honesty. I'm obsessed with you. Have been since the moment I saw you. I've broken rules, endangered alliances, spent resources that should have gone elsewhere, all to create a situation where I could keep you close. That's not rational. It's not smart. It's pure, selfish desire wrapped in the excuse of protection. At least you admit it. I've never denied what I am. He moved to the window, stared out at the city lights beginning to sparkle in the darkness. I'm a monster who runs an empire built on fear and violence, but I'm also a man who memorized your coffee order, who listened to you talk about Botticelli for hours without getting bored, who kept every sketch you left behind because they were pieces of your soul rendered in graphite. I wanted to hate him. Needed to hate him. But the exhaustion in his voice, the tension in his shoulders, the way he'd just stripped himself bare with confession, it made him human in a way I couldn't reconcile with the Mafia boss who'd orchestrated my kidnapping. I drew you. The words came out barely above a whisper. This afternoon. Multiple times. I told myself I was trying to understand you, but really I was just what? He turned, and the vulnerability in his expression stole my breath. Remembering. I wrapped my arms around myself. Remembering Daniel, the man who made me laugh, who listened like what I said mattered, who kissed me like I was precious. That man is still here. Dante crossed back to me in 3 long strides. Underneath the violence and the power plays, and the necessary evil, Daniel was always just Dante pretending he could be normal for a few hours a week. But Daniel was a lie. Daniel was the truth without context. His hands framed my face again, tilting my chin so I had no choice but to meet his eyes. Every word he spoke to you was real. Every touch was genuine. The only lie was the name, and even that. Daniel is my middle name. My mother called me that. It's the name of the man beneath a monster. I don't know what you want from me. My voice broke. Forgiveness? Understanding? Love? Time. His thumb wiped away a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. I want time for you to see that I'm not your enemy. Time for you to remember why you smiled when I walked into that coffee shop. Time for you to understand that everything I've done, every manipulation and calculated move, has been because I couldn't stand the thought of a world where you didn't belong to me. People aren't belongings. You're right. He leaned in, his lips brushing my forehead in a gesture so tender it made my chest ache. But you're mine anyway. Have been since that first moment in the gallery. And I'm yours. Whether you want me or not. Whether you believe me or not. He pulled back before I could respond, before I could process the confession or the way my traitorous heart had stuttered at his words. Dinner will be ready in an hour. Wear something comfortable. We're eating on the terrace tonight. I don't want to have dinner with you. Then sit in silence while I eat and watch the city lights. He moved toward the door, paused. But you'll sit with me anyway, because part of you is curious. Part of you remembers Tuesday afternoons and rain-soaked kisses, and the way I made you feel seen for the first time in your life. He left before I could deny it. Left me standing among scattered drawings and the ruins of my certainty, wondering when exactly I'd stopped being completely sure I wanted to escape. I wore the comfortable clothes he'd suggested. Soft linen pants and a cashmere sweater that felt like a cloud against my skin. Told myself I was choosing compliance because fighting over dinner seemed exhausting, not because part of me wanted to see what he'd planned. The terrace was transformed. String lights hung overhead, casting everything in warm amber. A small table had been set for two, white linens and crystal glasses catching the light. Beyond the railing, the city sprawled beneath us like a carpet of stars, close enough to touch but impossibly distant. Dante stood at the edge, one hand on the railing, his profile sharp against the darkening sky. He'd changed into dark slacks and a charcoal sweater that made him look younger, less dangerous, almost like Daniel again. "It's beautiful," I said, before I could stop myself. He turned, and something in his expression softened. "I thought you might appreciate the view. You mentioned once that you felt trapped by the city. Up here, you're above it all. Still trapped, though." But the words lacked bite, semantics. He pulled out a chair for me, waited. After a moment's hesitation, I sat. He pushed the chair in with careful precision, his fingers briefly brushing my shoulders. Dinner arrived via Marco, who set down plates of pasta that smelled like heaven and disappeared without a word. The food was homemade. I could tell by the irregular shapes of the ravioli, the rustic quality of the sauce. "Did you make this?" I asked, surprised. "My mother taught me to cook before she died." Dante poured wine into both glasses. "She said a man who couldn't feed himself was no man at all. So yes, I made it. Butternut squash ravioli with sage brown butter. You mentioned it was your favorite once." Of course he'd remembered. He remembered everything. We ate in silence for several minutes, the only sounds the clink of silverware and the distant hum of traffic far below. The pasta was perfect, tender, flavorful, made with a care that spoke of practice and patience. It tasted like comfort, like home. Like things I'd lost when my mother died. "Dr. Rossi says you have real talent," Dante said finally. "She thinks with proper instruction you could pursue a doctorate if you wanted. What I want is irrelevant when I'm a prisoner. What you want is the only thing that matters to me." He set down his fork, leaned back in his chair. "Name it. Anything within my power to give you, it's yours, freedom. Besides that," his jaw tightened, "I've explained why I can't." "Then you're a liar." I pushed my plate away, the food suddenly tasteless. "You say what I want matters, but only if it aligns with what you've already decided. That's not caring, Dante. That's control dressed up as consideration." "You're right." The admission surprised me. I'm controlling. Possessive. I've built my entire life on controlling circumstances, manipulating outcomes, ensuring nothing happens that I haven't planned for. And with you. He stopped, ran a hand through his hair. "With you, I'm terrified. Because for the first time in my life, I want something I can't force, can't buy, can't manipulate into existence." "What do you want?" "You. Simple. Direct. Devastating. Not your compliance or your resignation or your eventual tolerance. I want you to look at me the way you looked at Daniel. I want you to smile when I enter a room instead of calculating escape routes. I want..." His voice roughened. "I want you to want me back." The vulnerability in his confession made my chest tight. "You can't force feelings, I know." He stood, moved to the railing, stared out at the city. "Which is why I'm trying something I'm not good at. Patience. Letting you come to me instead of taking what I want. It goes against every instinct I have." I joined him at the railing, leaving space between us. The night air was cool, carrying scents of the city, exhaust and food and life happening far below. "Tell me about your mother." The change of subject made him glance at me, surprise flickering across his features. "Why?" "Because Dr. Rossi mentioned her. Because you learned to cook from her. Because every time you talk about her, your voice changes." I wrapped my arms around myself. "Because I'm trying to understand how someone who clearly loved his mother became someone who kidnaps women." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, Her name was Isabella. She was an art history professor before she married my father. That's how I met Dr. Rossi. She loved Renaissance paintings, spoke Italian and French and English, could quote Dante Alighieri from memory. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. My father named me after the poet because she loved the Divine Comedy. Thought it was romantic. What happened to her? Cancer. Pancreatic. She was dead 6 months after diagnosis. His hands tightened on the railing. I was 15. Old enough to understand death, young enough to be destroyed by it. My father threw himself into the business afterward, became harder, meaner, taught me that love was weakness, that caring about anything made you vulnerable. But you didn't believe him. I tried to. He turned to face me. Built walls, kept everyone at arm's length, convinced myself I was better off alone. And then I walked into a gallery and saw you looking at Birth of Venus with tears in your eyes, and every wall I'd built crumbled like they were made of paper. That's not love. That's obsession. My mother used to say the Italian language doesn't distinguish between the two. There's ti amo for love and ti voglio for want, but nothing that captures the space between, the consuming desire that's both pure and possessive. He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. Whatever this is, it's bigger than want, more dangerous than simple love. It's the kind of feeling that starts wars. I should have pulled away. Instead, I found myself leaning into his touch, my body betraying every rational thought. I'm not a country to be conquered. No. His thumb traced my cheekbone. You're the masterpiece I'd steal from the Uffizi if I thought I could keep you on my wall. The poem I'd memorize if I thought I could carry you in my pocket. The song I'd learn to play if I thought music could capture what I feel when you look at me. You're good with words. I'm desperate. His forehead touched mine. Absolutely. Pathetically desperate for any sign that you don't completely hate me, that some small part of you remembers how good we were together in that coffee shop. We were never together. That was all pretense. It was the most honest I've ever been. His hands cupped my face. Every laugh, every story, every moment I listened to you talk about your dreams. That was real, more real than anything else in my life. The kiss happened before I could think, before I could remember all the reasons it was a terrible idea. His lips met mine with a gentleness that contradicted everything I knew about him, a reverence that made my knees weak. He tasted like wine and want, like memory and possibility, like every Tuesday afternoon condensed into a single perfect moment. I kissed him back. God help me. I kissed him back with 3 months of questions and anger and confused longing. My hands fisted in his sweater, pulling him closer even as my mind screamed that this was wrong. This was exactly what he wanted. This was me surrendering. He made a sound low in his throat, something between a groan and a prayer. His hand slid into my hair, angling my head to deepen the kiss. It was nothing like that first kiss in the rain, that had been tentative, questioning. This was claim and confirmation, possession and surrender all at once. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes had gone almost black with desire. Tell me to stop. The word caught in my throat. Tell me to stop, Mia, because if you don't, I'm going to keep kissing you, going to carry you inside and spend the entire night showing you exactly how much I've wanted you. How long I've dreamed about having you in my bed, in my home, in my life permanently. The image his words conjured made heat pool low in my belly, but reality crashed back, the manipulation, the lies, the fact that I was here against my will. Stop! He released me immediately, stepped back with visible effort. His breathing was ragged, his hands clenched at his sides. Okay. Okay? I stared at him, surprised. You said stop. I stopped. He turned away, gripped the railing like it was the only thing keeping him upright. I'm many things, Mia, but I'm not a rapist. When you come to my bed, and you will, eventually, it'll be because you choose it, because you want me as much as I want you. That's never going to happen. We'll see. He glanced back at me, and the heat in his gaze made my breath catch. Go inside. Go to your room. Lock the door if it makes you feel safer, but know that I'll be lying awake 3 doors down, thinking about the way you just kissed me back, the way your hands pulled me closer, the way you responded like you've been waiting for this as long as I have. I hate you. I know. His smile was sad, beautiful. But you kissed me anyway. I fled. There was no other word for it. I practically ran back inside, down the hallway, into my bedroom where I locked the door with shaking hands, pressed my back against it, and tried to calm my racing heart. He was right. I'd kissed him back. Had wanted to keep kissing him despite everything. And that terrified me more than any threat or manipulation could. The next 3 weeks passed in a strange routine. Dr. Rossi came twice a week, filling my head with art history and critical theory. Dante kept his distance mostly, appearing for dinner and occasional encounters in the library, but never pushing, never demanding more than conversation. Marco and the other guards became familiar presences, silent sentinels who ensured my imprisonment remained comfortable. I drew constantly. Filled sketchbook after sketchbook with faces and hands and architectural details from memory. And yes, more drawings of Dante. Sleeping, reading, standing at the window with his coffee. I told myself it was artistic study. I knew I was lying. My father called weekly. Each conversation was the same. Promises that he was working on getting me out, pleas that I stay strong, apologies that felt increasingly hollow. Marco had stolen $3 million and disappeared. The Calabrians wanted blood, and I was caught in the middle of a war I hadn't started. The 22nd day of my captivity began like all the others. Coffee with Dante in the kitchen. We'd fallen into the habit of sharing mornings, talking about art or books or nothing at all. He made me laugh despite myself, reminded me why I'd fallen for Daniel in the first place. "There's something I want to show you," he said, as I rinsed my cup. "If you're willing." "Is this the part where you reveal the dungeon?" His lips twitched. "No dungeon. Just something I think you'll appreciate. We'd have to leave the penthouse." I set down the cup slowly. "You're asking permission?" "I'm asking if you trust me enough to get in a car with me." He held my gaze. "I know I've given you no reason to, but I promise. I'm not taking you somewhere dangerous. I'm taking you somewhere beautiful." Every instinct screamed to refuse. But I'd been in this penthouse for 3 weeks, staring at the same walls, feeling my world shrink with each passing day. And God help me, I did trust him. Not completely, not rationally, but enough. "Okay." Surprise flickered across his face. "Okay? Take me somewhere beautiful." I met his eyes. "Show me you're not just a cage wrapped in good intentions." The drive took 40 minutes, heading out of the city into countryside I barely recognized. Dante drove himself, no bodyguards in sight, though I suspected they followed at a distance. We didn't talk much, just existed in comfortable silence while Italian opera played softly through the speakers. He finally pulled up to gates that opened automatically, revealing a long driveway lined with cypress trees. At the end stood a villa. Old stone, climbing roses, windows that glinted in the morning sun like promises. "What is this place?" I asked as he helped me out of the car. "My mother's house." He kept my hand in his as we walked toward the entrance. She inherited it from her family. After she died, my father couldn't stand to visit, so it sat empty for years until I restored it. Inside, the villa was a perfect marriage of old and new. Original frescoes on the ceilings, modern amenities hidden discreetly. But what made me gasp was the art. Paintings covered every wall, Renaissance masterpieces I'd only ever seen in textbooks. They can't be. Originals? Some are. Others are the best forgeries money can buy. He watched my face as I moved from painting to painting, drinking in details I'd memorized from photographs. I've been collecting since I was 20, building the gallery my mother always dreamed of having. This is incredible. I stopped in front of a Botticelli. Not Birth of Venus, but Madonna of the Pomegranate, stared at the gold leaf and delicate brushstrokes until my vision blurred. "You brought me to a private museum." "I brought you home." His voice was quiet behind me. "This villa, this collection, it's all in a trust with your name on it. Has been since the day after I took you." I turned slowly. "What?" "If something happens to me, it's yours. The villa, the art, enough money to maintain both for the rest of your life." He moved closer. "I told you. What you want matters to me, and you want beauty, culture, the freedom to study art without worrying about survival. So I'm giving it to you. Why would you—" My throat closed. You barely know me. I know you better than anyone else in your life. His hand came up, cupped my cheek. I know you cry at Botticelli and laugh at Caravaggio's violence. I know you take your coffee with 2 sugars and hate mornings but love sunsets. I know you'd sacrifice everything for people who don't deserve it and dream about cities you think you'll never see. I know you, Mia, and I love you. The confession hung between us, huge and terrifying. You can't love me. You kidnapped me. I can do both. His thumb traced my lower lip. Love you and imprison you. Worship you and possess you. Want your happiness while being selfish enough to keep you close. I'm not a good man, Kara, but I'm a man who'd give you the world if you'd let me. Tears spilled down my cheeks. This is too much. All of this is too much. Then take what you can handle and leave the rest. He kissed my forehead, gentle and reverent. Stay here today. Explore the villa. Look at the paintings. And when you're ready, we'll go back. But know that this place is yours whenever you want it. However you want it. He started to pull away, but my hand shot out, caught his wrist. Stay. Show me everything. Tell me about your mother and the pieces she loved. The smile that spread across his face was pure sunshine, transforming him from dangerous to devastating. Yeah? Yeah. I threaded my fingers through his. Show me your world, Dante, the real one beneath the violence. We spent the day lost in art and stories. He showed me his mother's favorites, explained provenance and acquisition stories that were probably illegal, but undeniably fascinating. We ate lunch on a terrace overlooking vineyards, drank wine that tasted like summer, talked about everything and nothing, and somewhere between the Raphael and the Titian, between the 2nd and 3rd glass of wine, I stopped pretending I didn't feel something for him. Stopped fighting the pull that had existed since that first coffee shop meeting. Stopped resisting the truth that I'd been falling for him long before I knew his real name. When he kissed me in front of a Caravaggio depicting Saint Sebastian's martyrdom, I kissed him back without hesitation. Let him back me against the wall, let his hands explore, let myself feel instead of think. Come to bed with me, he whispered against my lips. Let me show you how I've dreamed of loving you. This time, I didn't tell him to stop. The bedroom in the villa was different from the one in the penthouse, softer somehow, with gauzy curtains that filtered afternoon light into something golden and dreamlike. Dante's hands trembled slightly as he unbuttoned my blouse, each movement deliberate and careful, like I was one of the masterpieces downstairs that might shatter if handled roughly. We can stop, he murmured against my neck, his breath warm on my skin. Any time. Just say the word. Don't stop. My own hands worked at his shirt, fumbling with buttons until he helped, until fabric fell away, and I could trace the lines of muscle and ink, a full-sleeve tattoo on his left arm depicting scenes from Dante's Inferno. Don't you dare stop. What happened next was nothing like I'd imagined. There was no violence, no possession disguised as passion. Instead, he touched me like worship, kissed me like prayer, made love to me with a reverence that brought tears to my eyes. Every caress asked permission. Every movement checked for consent. He gave me control even as I surrendered. Let me set the pace, even as he guided us both higher. Afterward, we lay tangled in sheets that smelled of lavender and sunshine. My head on his chest where I could hear his heartbeat slowly returning to normal. His fingers traced lazy patterns on my shoulder. And for the first time since he'd walked back into my life as Dante instead of Daniel, I felt completely at peace. I love you. The words came easier the second time. He pressed them into my hair, my forehead, my lips. I've loved you since that gallery, since before I had any right to. I know. I tilted my head to look at him. I think part of me has always known, even when I hated you, even when I wanted to hate you, there was something underneath. Recognition, maybe. Like my soul knew yours before my mind caught up. Very poetic for someone who studies visual art, but his smile was soft, unguarded. Blame Dr. Rossi. She's been making me read Petrarch. I traced the tattoo on his arm, following the sinners descending into hell. When did you get this? After my mother died. 17 and stupid, thinking ink could somehow capture grief. His hand caught mine, pressed it flat against his bicep. The poem was her favorite. She used to read it to me in Italian when I couldn't sleep. Read it to me now. So he did, his voice dropping into fluid Italian that I didn't understand but felt in my bones. The words wrapped around us like silk, transforming the bedroom into something sacred. When he finished, I kissed him again, slower this time, savoring instead of desperate. We stayed at the villa for 3 days. 3 perfect days where the outside world ceased to exist, where I wasn't a hostage and he wasn't a monster, where we were just Mia and Dante learning each other's bodies and histories and dreams. He cooked for me, simple Italian dishes his mother had taught him. I drew him in every conceivable position and lighting condition. We made love and talked, and existed in a bubble I knew couldn't last but wanted to anyway. On the 4th morning, reality crashed back. Dante's phone rang at dawn, jarring us both awake. I felt him tense against me before he even looked at the screen, his body going from relaxed to combat-ready in seconds. What is it? His voice was all business, no trace of the gentle lover who'd held me through the night. A pause. Then, when? Where? Another pause. Longer. Understood. I'm on my way. He was out of bed before I could process, pulling on clothes with efficient, practiced movements. We need to get back to the city, now. What happened? Your brother surfaced. He tossed me my clothes, already moving toward the door. The Calabrians have him. They're offering a trade. Marco for you. My blood turned to ice. What? Your father made a deal. Told them where to find your brother in exchange for their promise to leave you alone. His jaw was tight, fury radiating off him in waves. He didn't know, or didn't care, that they'd use Marco as bait to draw you out, to draw me out. We have to help him. I was dressing now too, hands shaking. He's my brother. Whatever he did, I'm not letting them have you. Dante caught my shoulders, forced me to look at him. Do you understand? I will burn this entire city down before I let the Calabrians touch you. Then what do we do? His smile was terrible, beautiful. The grin of a man who'd built an empire on calculated violence. We go to war. The drive back to the city took 30 minutes. Dante made calls in rapid-fire Italian, issuing orders that I only half understood. By the time we reached the penthouse, it had been transformed into a command center. Men in suits everywhere, weapons being checked and loaded, maps spread across every surface. The exchange is set for midnight at the old warehouse district. One of Dante's lieutenants reported. They want Mia delivered alone, unarmed, in exchange for Marco. They'll kill her the second they have her. Dante's voice was ice. This isn't about the money anymore. It's about sending a message that no one steals from the Calabrians and lives, so we don't make the exchange. I stepped forward, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. We get Marco out another way. Every man in the room turned to look at me. Dante's expression was unreadable. There is no other way. They have him in their stronghold. 20 men minimum, all armed, all loyal. It would take an army to breach those walls. Then get an army. I moved to the table, studied the maps. You're Dante Caruso. You run half the city. Call in favors, make alliances, do whatever you do to mobilize forces. But I'm not standing by while my brother dies for stealing money from you. He stole from me and endangered you. Dante's hands fisted at his sides. Why do you care what happens to him? Because he's family. Because despite everything, he's still my brother. I met his eyes. And because if you let him die, you'll never forgive yourself. I know you, Dante. Underneath all the violence and calculated cruelty, you're the boy who learned to cook from his mother, who collects art because beauty matters, who falls in love with strangers in galleries. That man wouldn't abandon someone to save himself trouble. Silence stretched across the room. Then Dante turned to his lieutenant. Call the Russos, the Benedettis. Anyone who owes us favors or fears us enough to cooperate. Tell them the Calabrians crossed a line and we're going to war. Anyone who stands with us gets a piece of their territory when this is over. Boss, do it! His voice cracked like a whip. And get our best men armed and ready. We move in 3 hours. The room exploded into activity. Men made calls, loaded weapons, studied maps and entry points. Dante pulled me aside, into the library where we'd spent so many afternoons. You don't have to do this, I said before he could speak. I know Marco doesn't deserve. I'm not doing it for Marco. His hands cupped my face. I'm doing it because you asked me to. Because making you happy matters more than vengeance or territory or maintaining the status quo. You want your brother alive? Then I'll bring him back alive, even though he stole from you? Even though. He kissed me, hard and possessive. But after tonight, he leaves the city, disappears. Because I can forgive once for your sake, but I won't risk you a second time. Deal. And you... His forehead touched mine. You stay here, safe. Surrounded by guards who'll die before they let anyone touch you. This isn't negotiable, Mia. I can focus on getting your brother out if I know you're protected. I hate being sidelined. I hate the thought of you in danger more than I hate anything else in this world. He pulled back, and the expression on his face was raw. If something happened to you, if I lost you, I'd raze this entire city, kill everyone who'd ever looked at you wrong. Become the monster you thought I was when this started. You're not a monster. With you, I'm not. His thumb traced my lips. You make me want to be better, softer. The kind of man who deserves someone like you. You already are that man. I caught his hand, pressed a kiss to his palm. Now go get my stupid brother before I change my mind about forgiving him. The hours that followed were the longest of my life. I sat in the library, surrounded by guards, unable to do anything but wait and worry. Marco, the bodyguard, sat with me, his presence surprisingly comforting. Boss is good at this, he said when I'd worn a path in the carpet with my pacing. Been doing it since he was younger than you. He'll get your brother out. And if he doesn't? Then we go to war properly, but it won't come to that. Marco leaned back in his chair. You changed him, you know. Made him remember there's more to life than territory and vengeance. That's worth more than all the soldiers in the world. At 2 a.m., my phone rang. Dante's name flashed across the screen. It's done. His voice was rough, exhausted. Your brother is alive, battered but breathing. The Calabrians won't be a problem anymore. What did you do? What I do best. Made them an offer they couldn't refuse. A pause. I'm bringing Marco to the penthouse. He'll stay under guard until he heals enough to travel. Then he disappears. And my father? Silence stretched across the line. Then, your father set this in motion, told the Calabrians where to find Marco knowing they'd use him as bait. He traded his son's life for the promise of debt forgiveness. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. He wouldn't. He did. My men recorded the conversation. Dante's voice gentled. I'm sorry, Kara. But your father chose his own survival over both his children. That's not the kind of man who deserves your loyalty. I sank into the nearest chair, the phone pressed to my ear as tears streamed down my face. My father. My family. Everything I'd tried to protect, and it had been rotten from the start. Come home, Dante said softly. Let me hold you. Let me remind you that family isn't always blood. I'm already home. The truth of it settled in my chest. I have been since that first night. I just wasn't ready to admit it. Marco arrived an hour later, carried in by 2 of Dante's men. He looked terrible. Black eye, split lip, bruises covering every visible inch of skin. But he was alive, breathing, conscious enough to meet my eyes with something like shame. Mia. His voice was rough. I'm so sorry. I never meant... I didn't think. I know. I sat on the edge of the bed where they'd laid him. You never think. That's always been your problem. I'll make it right. I'll pay back every cent. You'll disappear. Dante's voice came from the doorway, cold and final. I'm giving you one chance, because Mia asked me to save you. But if you ever contact her again, if you ever come back to this city, if you even think about causing more problems, I'll finish what the Calabrians started. Marco nodded, wincing. Understood. There's money in an account with your name on it. Enough to start over somewhere far from here. Dante moved into the room, stood beside me. Use it wisely, because it's the last help you'll get from anyone in this family. After the doctor had checked Marco and given him something for pain, after he'd fallen into drugged sleep, I found Dante on the terrace where we'd had our first real kiss. He stood at the railing, hands gripping the metal like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Thank you. I wrapped my arms around him from behind, pressed my face to his back. For saving him. For doing something you didn't want to do because I asked. I'd do anything for you. His hands covered mine. Tonight proved that. I risked men, resources, alliances, all because you looked at me with those eyes and asked me to be better than my nature. Your nature is better than you think. He turned in my arms, and the expression on his face was raw with exhaustion and relief, and something that looked like worship. Marry me. The words hung in the air between us, huge and impossible. What? Marry me. He said it again, stronger this time. Not because I'm forcing you or manipulating you or playing some long game, but because I love you, because you make me want to be the man my mother hoped I'd become, because I can't imagine my life without you in it. Dante, I know it's fast. I know we've only been together, really together, for a few days. But I've loved you for 6 months, planned my entire life around having you in it. And tonight, when I was storming that warehouse, all I could think was that if something went wrong, if I died, I wanted you to have everything. My name, my protection, my legacy. All of it. You're insane. But I was smiling through tears, completely. He pulled a ring from his pocket, emerald surrounded by diamonds, old and beautiful, and clearly an heirloom. This was my mother's. My father gave it to her when they were younger than we are now. She wore it every day until she died. And I've been carrying it for 3 weeks, waiting for the right moment to ask. This is the right moment? After a gang war and my brother nearly dying? This is the perfect moment. He dropped to one knee on the terrace, the city lights creating a halo behind him. Because it proves that whatever happens, whatever chaos erupts, we face it together. So, Mia Santoro, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of you? I looked at him. This beautiful, broken, dangerous man who'd orchestrated my kidnapping and then given me the world. Who'd learned my coffee order and kept my sketches and loved me with an intensity that should have been terrifying, but instead felt like coming home. Yes. The word came out choked with tears. Yes, you insane, possessive, wonderful man. I'll marry you. He slid the ring onto my finger with shaking hands, then surged up to kiss me like I was air, and he'd been drowning. We stood on that terrace for hours, wrapped in each other as the city woke around us, planning a future that had seemed impossible just weeks ago. We married 3 months later in the villa's garden, surrounded by cypress trees and climbing roses. Dr. Rossi officiated, tears streaming down her face as she blessed the union. The guest list was small, mostly Dante's family and associates, a few friends I'd made during my art history studies. My father wasn't invited. Marco sent a card from somewhere in South America, wishing us happiness he probably didn't feel entitled to. I wore my mother's wedding dress, altered to fit, carrying a bouquet of white roses. Dante wore a black suit that made him look like a Renaissance prince, his eyes never leaving my face as I walked down the aisle. When he said his vows in Italian and then English, his voice broke on the words, "I love you." When I slipped the wedding band onto his finger, I realized I was exactly where I was supposed to be, not trapped, but chosen, not imprisoned, but cherished. The reception stretched into evening, champagne flowing as freely as laughter. We danced under string lights while a quartet played songs from my mother's era. Dante held me close, his lips brushing my temple as we swayed. "Happy?" he murmured, deliriously. I leaned back to look at him. "Though I should probably hate you for the fact that I'm happy. You did kidnap me. Protective custody," he corrected with a grin. "And technically, you kidnapped me right back. Stole my heart that day in the gallery and never gave it back. Such poetry from a crime boss. I contain multitudes." He spun me under his arm. "Besides, you bring out the poet in me, among other things." "Other things?" I raised an eyebrow. "The lover. The husband. The man who's going to spend tonight showing his wife exactly how much he adores her." His eyes darkened with promise. "And every night after, for the rest of our lives." True to his word, our wedding night was perfect, not just the physical intimacy, though that was transcendent, but the quiet moments between, the way he removed my veil with reverent hands, the way he read Dante Alighieri to me in Italian, while I sketched him in the lamplight. The way he held me afterward, his heartbeat steady beneath my ear, and whispered plans for our future. "I'm thinking we open the villa to the public," he said into the darkness. "Turn it into a museum like my mother always wanted. You could curate, teach, give others the gift of beauty you've given me. And the other business?" I traced the tattoo on his arm. "The family obligations? I'm working on transitioning into legitimate enterprises. It'll take time. You can't abandon an empire overnight. But I want our children to inherit something besides violence and secrets." He tilted my chin up. "I want them to have what we didn't. Safety, choice, the freedom to become whoever they want to be." Children. The word made my heart stutter. Plural? At least 3. His grin was boyish. I was an only child, lonely as hell. I want a house full of little artists who argue about Caravaggio over breakfast and bring home stray cats. Very specific vision. I've had 6 months to plan it. He kissed me softly. 6 months of imagining every detail of our life together, and now I get to live it. 5 years later, I stood in the villa's garden, watching our daughter chase butterflies while our son slept in my arms. The museum had opened 2 years prior, drawing scholars and art lovers from around the world. Dante had successfully transitioned most of his business ventures into legal enterprises, restaurants, real estate, import, export, that actually imported and exported legal goods. He still had connections to the old world, still commanded respect and sometimes fear. But he'd built something new, something clean, for our children to inherit. "She has your eyes," Dante said, coming up behind me to wrap his arms around us both. "And your stubborn streak." Refused to nap because butterflies were more important. I wonder where she gets the stubborn streak. I leaned back against him. Couldn't possibly be from the man who orchestrated an elaborate months-long courtship that involved kidnapping. "Protective custody," he corrected automatically, making me laugh. "And it worked, didn't it? You're here. Happy. Mine. Yours." I turned in his arms, careful not to wake the baby. "Though technically you're mine too. That's how marriage works. Best deal I ever made." He kissed me, soft and sweet, even if it did require some unconventional negotiation tactics. Our daughter ran over, demanding to show us a butterfly that had landed on her finger. Dante crouched down to her level, pointing out the patterns on its wings, explaining about metamorphosis and beauty, and how sometimes the most extraordinary things come from unexpected places. I watched them together, my daughter and the man who'd once been a stranger, then a monster, then a lover, and finally a husband and father, and marveled at how life had unfolded. The path had been twisted, started with deception and desperation, but it had led us here, to this garden, this family, this improbable happy ending. That night, after the children were asleep, Dante found me in the library. I'd been sketching, still did, almost daily, and he appeared in the doorway like he had so many times before. "What are you drawing?" He moved behind my chair, looking over my shoulder. "Us. That first night on the terrace when you asked me to marry you." I showed him the sketch, 2 figures silhouetted against city lights, the moment suspended in graphite and shadow. I wanted to capture it before the memory faded. The memory will never fade. He took the sketchbook, studied the drawing with the intensity he brought to everything. "This is beautiful, Kara. They all are." He gestured to the dozens of framed sketches covering the walls, our life together rendered in black and white, moments captured and preserved. "I wore my worst dress that night," I said softly, "tried to make myself forgettable so your guest wouldn't notice me, never knowing he already knew everything about me, that he'd been planning this for months. And I saw you anyway." He set down the sketchbook, pulled me to my feet, saw through the disguise to the woman underneath, the one who looked at art like it held the answers to everything, who made me believe in possibilities I'd given up on. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked. "How we started. The methods you used?" He considered the question seriously. "I regret that I hurt you, that I made you afraid, that I couldn't find a way to be with you that didn't involve manipulation and force." His hands cupped my face. "But I don't regret having you, loving you, building this life with you. Even if I could go back and change how we started, I wouldn't, because every moment, even the painful ones, led us here. Here is pretty perfect." I stretched up to kiss him. even if it started with the worst dress I owned, and a mafia boss pretending to be someone else. Daniel was never pretending. He deepened the kiss, walking me backward toward the desk. He was just Dante without the weight of everything else, the man I got to be when I was with you. We made love in the library, surrounded by books and sketches and the life we'd built from chaos. And afterward, wrapped in each other as moonlight streamed through the windows, I realized that every choice, from that first coffee to saying yes on the terrace to choosing to stay when I could have run, had been leading to this, to us, to forever. Dante traced idle patterns on my shoulder, his voice soft in the darkness. Ti amo, mia Caruso. Every version of you. The girl in the gallery, the woman in the coffee shop, the wife in my arms. All of it. Always. Ti amo, I whispered back, the Italian feeling right on my tongue. My Daniel. My Dante. My home. Outside, the world continued its chaos. But here, in this villa filled with art and love and family, we'd created our own masterpiece. Not perfect, too messy for that, too marked by our complicated beginning, but ours, real, true. And in the end, that was better than any fairy tale.